Hello. How you doing out there? So awesome that you are here. Hey, Brian. Hey, Jeremy. Hey, John. Hey, Paul. Hey, Randy. Hey, Charles. Hey, Jeff. It's so awesome that you guys are here. I am so happy to not be quite so sick anymore. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm running a good 80%. I'm not completely there, but I'm getting much, much, much better. So thank you, everybody out there, for all the kind thoughts and prayers and everything like that. It was a rough one. It was about Thursday. I think it took me about 5 days to finally crawl out of bed and start trying to walk around a little bit. So thank you so much to everybody out there. You guys are just the most awesome people on the planet. So, all right, well, cool. Well, we got an hour to hang out and talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. Today, I've got some surprises coming down the pipeline in the next coming month or two here, but I was going to let you guys know, since I had some time off, of course, I still had the guitar in my hand. And can you, first of all, Pam is saying, can you see me? Can everybody see me okay? Can everybody see my video? I'm hoping everybody can see my video. Let me know if you can see my video. And then let me know if you can see my audio or hear my audio okay. So I had to stay up an extra hour. Hey, Greg. Hey, guys. So, Randy, you can see me? You guys can see me? Okay. So Stephanie says just refresh and you should be able to see me. If you need to log out and log back in, sometimes that helps as well. It's Google Hangouts that this primarily uses, but for some reason, if Google Chrome is not working, if you use Firefox, Firefox tends to work really well too for these kind of things. So yeah, it's cutting off the top of my head. I still have hair up there, so we're good. Most importantly, I want to make sure you could see the guitar here. So anyway, again, I'm so glad you guys are all here. I'm glad you're taking an hour out of your day to hang out with me. But I wanted to tell you a little bit. Over this last week, I was practicing, and then when I finally was able to get out of bed, I came downstairs. And I have purchased a new toy for my computer system here. And it's made by a company called Positive Grid. I don't know if anybody's heard of that out there. I've messed with their stuff before, but I really hadn't messed with it that much. So it's called Positive Grid, and the software that I'm using, it's a plugin, an audio plugin, and it's called Bias, B-I-A-S. Has anybody out there ever heard of this before? Bias, B-I-A-S, by a company called Positive Grid. I'm just going to give you a second to see, because I am uber excited about this. So what I'm going to be doing sometime in the near future here is I'm going to be doing a how to record video, how to record audio, live, computer, all these different things. I got some friends that are in it as well. But anyway, if you've never heard of it, it's by a company called Positive Grid, and they make guitar plugins, and it's called Bias, B-I-A-S, and it is software, yes. So it's something that you plug into your computer, right? I've got my guitar now plugged into my computer, and then that's how I do all my recording and everything. And this software is freaking amazing. It's amazing. Now, I'm not going to waste the whole time talking to you about this, but if you're looking for awesome guitar tones, yeah, Paul D just wrote up their Bias amp. There's two different versions of it. There's one called Bias, B-I-A-S, Bias Effects, and you can get it for your desktop. You can get it for your iPad and all kinds of different things, but you can get it for your desktop. It's called Bias Effects. And Bias, it's not cheap. Okay, but Bias Effects has got some incredibly killer guitar tones, effects, amps, cabs, mics, all these different things. Okay, Yes, it is kind of expensive. Now they have the base, the narrowed down version, which is less than $100, and then I think the professional version is like $200. So this isn't for everybody, and I am not sponsored by them. I'm just telling you, I've been like a kid in a candy store since I got this, because it's unbelievable. So the second side of that is what Paul is asking about. There's the one product that's called Bias Effects, FX. And it's really the best one to get if you don't have anything, because it's got choruses and delays and reverbs and flanges and a bunch of great amps and a bunch of great cabinets and all kinds of different things like that. Stephanie, it's kind of like Line 6 Amplify, but it's more so like Amplitube or Guitar Rig or anything like that if you've ever used something like that. But the one that Paul D is talking about, it's called Bias Amp. Now, Bias Amp is a different product. They work together, but it's even more expensive if you get that. Bias Amp has two main things in it. Number one, it's got killer amp tones. It's DAW stuff, Brian, yes. It's got killer amp tones. And then it's also got this thing called amp matching. So you can match other guitar amps, and of course a bunch of people have matched, like professional studios and stuff have matched the sounds of just some of the greatest amps on the planet. Pam, it's okay. I don't want to say it's better than Guitar Rig 5 because I love Guitar Rig 5, but I would say that it's far more authentic to tone, I would say. The problem is that it is kind of expensive. You know, if you were going to buy just the Bias Effects desktop one, it's not too bad. If you buy the professional version, it's more. Bias Amp is even more money on top of that. So if you were going to look at one, the Bias Effects would be the one to look at. And then if you've got a bunch of money laying around and you don't have anything better to do, the Bias Amp would be the way to go. But I'm telling you, it is so amazing. So I've just been sitting here in my room when I have spare time, and I just dial in these tones, and it's just a lot of fun. So I don't have it set up with my MIDI or anything like that right now. I'm just playing with it, but it's got, I'm just going to take a minute here and show you this. So like if I go back to just the Bias Amp, just Bias Amp. So I'm not doing Bias Effects, I'm just going to Bias Amp. And I pull up like a blues amp, right? So I'm gonna go into blues here, and I'm just gonna pull up a J45. Okay. Now there's no effects. It's just a straightforward J45. Okay. And then if I go into like crunch, this is when it gets fun. So like this is a JCM 800. Oh, sorry. Here you go. Here's the JCM. Which is just that. Okay, now let me go back. Let me show you this. So I'm going to go back over here to the blues, go to that J45. Here's the J45. Which just sounds just stellar. You know, it's just you know, it's just got these great sounds. So let me pull up another one just to kind of show you here. I'll go to a little bit more bluesy one here. Here's a tweed. I don't know if you can hear that okay, if it's distorted or anything. You know, it's just, oh man, they're so unbelievable. You know, and then they've got, you know, like here's an orange. And I tell you, it probably doesn't sound so good because I'm trying to run everything through my computer, which I have to run this whole system to try and send them to you. But I'm telling you guys, it is so much fun. So if you love messing around with this stuff, I would tell you, just give this stuff a thought, okay? So I use Guitar Rig, and I use Amplitube. I've got Amplitube 4, which I think is just great. But yeah, it's just it's unbelievable. So I just wanted to let you know that. So what I'm going to be doing over the course of the next couple of months is making a course where a buddy of mine and I are going to get together. We're going to talk about mics. We're going to talk about miking cabinets. We're going to talk about recording direct to computer. We're going to talk about video and how to set up your video system and all these different things like that. So yeah, I get so many people out in the Guitar Zoom community, like a lot of you, that make videos, and people are always asking me, you know, well, how do you get a good sound out of it? Or how do you, and of course it's also, it's such a variable, but we're going to do the best we can to explain it to you. Jake says, I had my gem signed by Steve Vai last week. How do you protect it? What I did was, I've got a couple of my guitars signed by Steve Vai. And what I did was I brought it into an auto body shop, and they put, what is that stuff called that they put on like a car? They put that lacquer on there so it wouldn't come off. So that's what I've got on the back of mine. So the back of my guitar is scratched to no end, but where that signature is, lacquer, thank you. Yeah, clear coat. That's what I did. I just brought it into a body shop, had them clear coated. It took them very little time, and that thing will last before my guitar ever gets destroyed. So cool. So everybody, again, I'm so glad you guys are here. You're just so awesome. So let's, what's something you'd like to talk about today? Is there any questions you've got on your journey of acoustic guitar playing, or electric playing, or rhythm, or soloing, or arpeggios, or theory, or anything that you got? I'm here, and I am yours for an hour. Okay. How's the tummy? Boy, the tummy is better. I had a tear in my stomach from all the coughing that I was doing, and so my doctor said you can't cough anymore. And this was right in the middle of my coughing. He's like, you can bend over with a pillow, but if you keep going, you're going to wind up with a hernia. So I just had to force myself not to cough, which was the worst thing ever because I couldn't sleep for like 3 days. Summit, we're working on the summit right now. It is going to be in October, and it is going to be in Nashville. I have a meeting with the whatever you call her, the entertainment person tomorrow. And so I'm hoping I can get you guys dates by the end of the week. Okay. Can you go over the ZZ Top riff again? Of course I can. Thank you guys. And thank you for all your prayers and kind words and everything. I can't tell you how much it meant to me. It was awesome. Okay, so we'll get to that. Michael, we'll get to that in a second. Jeremy, we'll get to you in a second too. So Jake, that riff that I did, if you're talking about this one, is that what you were talking about? Is the Just Got Paid riff? Okay. So Jake, if that's what you're talking about, which I'm assuming you are, okay, perfect. Yeah, Just Got Paid. The big thing here is the down. Again, it depends on how you're picking this. If you watch me pick it, what I'm doing is going back and forth, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So after I do my hammer on, then I move into this alternate picking thing. So I'm going to do my hammer on from 5 to 7, and then I'm going to do a down on the 0 of the 6th string. And then what I'm going to do is an upstroke on the 5 of the 4th string. Now, for a lot of people, they might want to pick the whole thing down, and that's cool too. I'm just showing you. So then what I've got is just this down-up thing that'll be happening. I'm going down on 0, up on 5 on the 4th string, down on 0, up on 7 on the 5th string, down on 0, up. Let's see. Yep, so there I've got to go up on the 5 of the 5th string. And then back down and then up on the 7. So I have down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And then after that, I've got to go right over to this 3 on the 6th string and pluck that and then do a pull off. And then I'm going to do a hammer on from 5 to 7. So I have and then what I do is I'm giving the 6th string a little bit of a palm mute too, so it's not just you know, it's not ringing out the whole time. Okay, I'm just deadening that just slightly. Okay, so that's what I'm doing there. Okay, let me scroll back down a little bit because I lost some of your questions. As soon as I figure out where there's my mouse. I have two different mice here. Okay, so any suggestions on, Jeremy says, any suggestions on how to practice so solos sound less like scales and more like solos or musical licks? Well, there's lots of suggestions, but Jeremy, the big thing is that the more, like, when you first start learning how to play, you know, scales and things like that, you have a tendency of always running up and down, you know, up and down your scales because you're practicing them, which is great. But honestly, there's some, if I could call them tricks, there's some tricks to it to break things up. And the first thing is you want to start thinking about phrasing, okay, and make it really easy. Like, when you first start trying to do all this stuff, don't try and overthink everything. Because if you're thinking far too analytical all the time, like you're supposed to use this scale and then this scale and this scale, and I'm not downing any of that because I do it all too, but when you first start learning how to do this, the less you think, the better. So the first thing you do is you start thinking about it like speaking, Jeremy. You're going to talk with longer sentences and shorter sentences. So when you take your scale and start chopping it up, you stop and start again. Use some repetition, right? It's so easy for people to always think you're supposed to like move the whole time, you know. You don't want to do that. You want to repeat things. And then you stop and play a little bit. Okay? So that's one thing, Jeremy, is to start breaking things up in phrases. The second thing that you do is you start learning how to play more horizontal and less vertical. Okay, that's another thing that you can do. So instead of just always going up and down, like this all the time, start forcing yourself to move this way. Because your brain's going to think differently, and chances are, Jeremy, if you're like most people, you'll have to think a little harder when you move this way because you're not so used to it. So it's going to slow you down, and it's going to stop those same patterns that you tend to play over and over and over when you're playing scales. And then the third thing I would tell you, Jeremy, is start thinking about what I call intervallic playing, which doesn't mean you got to play a bunch of different intervals, but what you're doing is you're putting distance between your notes. So instead of just going up and down like this, what you do is you start learning how to jump over things. So let me show you. I got this jam track that I started off with here. This is in F sharp minor, and I'll just use pentatonic, okay? I won't use anything fancy, just pentatonic. So here it is. I'll play in the first position here. I'm not doing anything fancy. Okay, so with phrasing and with moving around more vertically, or excuse me, more horizontally, and then adding some space in between, like with my intervallic movement, things start sounding more and more real. Now, the last thing that I got to tell you, and then I got to move on to somebody else's question too, but use your ear. When you're listening to songs, what happens so often with players is they're so inundated with what's going on in their fretboard, like they're just scale and arpeggio and lick and pattern and blah, 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 that they forget to just listen to the music. You want to be able to respond to that music either by logic, because you know it's an F sharp minor and you have these options, or by your ear kind of helping you to know where to go, okay? And you don't have to do that the whole time, but it makes a big difference because most people don't really do it at all, okay? Now, Michael, I'm going to come back to your echo effect idea because that one's a little bit more involved, and I'll get to that in just a second. Jeffrey says, when you are inspired by so many different styles of music, how do you decide where to focus your study? That's tough. I think the most important thing, Jeffrey, is that you have to figure out who you are, not everybody that you want to be, because I get that, but you got to figure out what makes most sense to you. If you look at this guitar, you see it's an Ibanez Gem. It's a Steve Vai model guitar. I don't play anything like Steve Vai. I don't sound anything like Steve Vai. I would almost say I'm more of either a David Gilmour or Angus Young kind of player than I am a Steve Vai player. And not because I don't love Steve Vai, but it's not what I gravitate to. So I learned Steve Vai songs and things like that, but it's not where I don't think where my heart lies in my study of playing. So that's one thing you got to think about, Jeffrey, is you're always learning songs by all kinds of different people and, working on your technique and, your experiences that you're having. But the bottom line is when you go to approach your fretboard, what you need to do is start cultivating how you want to see it. And then you start trying to find some other players out there that's like, oh, I locked up for a second. I'm sorry about that. Like for me, I see my fretboard far more the way Joe Satriani sees his fretboard than I do the way Steve Vai sees his fretboard, if that kind of makes sense. So anyway, hopefully that helps you a little bit. On my Strat, I lose volume when bending the high E string. Any suggestions? Jim says, on my Strat, I lose volume when bending the high E string. Any suggestions? Well, you're going to have less volume on your high E string no matter what, right? But if your string is actually dying, you need to make sure that your pressure is down all the way as you bend up. And the second thing is you got to make sure that it's not touching another fret where it's causing it to die, right? And you got to make sure that your pickups are set appropriately too. Sometimes what happens is the pickups on the bottom get pushed in, so they get further away from the strings, and therefore there's less of a vibration that happens from the pickup, from the magnet on the pickup. So you got to make sure that that's not happening either. But if it's just low volume all the way around, you might have to have your pickups checked as well. So yeah, Brian, I'm sorry about the lights. I'll do a better job next time of bringing those down a little bit. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see, Carl. I tried. Okay, so you got a persona set up. Yeah, guys, that's another thing I'm going to talk about a little bit. And believe me, you can always ask questions about gear too. But the thing about having an interface, you call it. An interface is where you plug in your vocals and your guitar and everything like that. I know it's more money to buy a decent interface, but the nice thing about buying a decent interface is you have less hassles. When you go to run your DAW, it's called a DAW, or Digital Audio Workstation, which is what you use for your recording. When you go to run that, the better the product is, the interface, the more compatible they're going to be with each other, which makes all the difference in the world. So, if it's the difference between spending $80 on an audio interface and spending $150, and again, I'm not trying to tell you to spend your money on this stuff, but if you can spend more money, it's always worth it, because it's better to have something that your computer, that your digital audio workstation, or your software that you're recording with, that everything is compatible with it. It sees it, it accepts it, there's no big problems, there's no latency problems, which you wind up a lot with certain things. John, yeah, I'll definitely get a different light in here. So again, I'm just glad to be here right now, but I'll make sure that the lights are better next time, guys, I promise, okay? Let's see here. Let's see. Jonathan says, how do you learn to start using your pinky finger instead of just using 3 fingers for lead? And how do you strengthen the pinky? Well, the first thing is you got to start using it, right? You have to force yourself to use it. So if you think about it this way, in a practicing situation, not necessarily in performance, but in practicing, always think you have 4 fingers for 4 frets, right? So if you're playing pentatonic, you're going to use that pinky for the last note. And if you're playing, you know, like a major scale, you know, if you're playing the closed position like this, then you use your pinky there. If you're playing a spread fingering, you use your pinky out here. Okay. But I have a lot of friends that don't use their pinky much at all. If you really want to use it, you just have to start, you know, enabling yourself on regular daily practices to use it all the time. So you know, like just your exercises, like this sort of thing. You know, just start developing it. Now, for pinky strength, there's a couple of different things that you can do. If you've seen my legato exercises, what you can do is put like your third finger down on the third string on the 7th fret. That's where I'm at. It doesn't matter where you go. But you start doing hammer-ons and pull-offs. To start developing the strength of that, okay? Another thing that you can do is you can go through and just start doing some exercises where you pick the third and the pinky like this. Now you're going to hate it, right? When you first start doing it, you're going to hate that because these two fingers really do kind of suck and they don't really like to play well together. So you're going to wind up noticing that it can be frustrating, but I'm telling you, in the long run, you are way better off, you know, learning to utilize all 4 fingers for sure. John says, loving acoustic now course. I am so glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear that. Let's see here. Marilyn says, what would be a good first pedal? Well, it depends on what your pedal's going to be. It depends on, Marilyn, what would you like for a pedal? Now I'm going to keep trying to scroll through all these because there's a lot of dialogue here. But Marilyn, what would be a pedal that you're looking for? Like a distortion pedal or a chorus pedal or a delay pedal, or what would you like? Let's see. Jeremy says, with the cage chord system of chord shapes, can you tell us which pentatonic scale positions are the ones that start right around each chord shape? Well, it depends, Jeremy, on not really, because it depends on what chord you're in that particular situation, right? So if you're on a C chord and you're in C major, like, you know what I mean? If you were going to be in C major, see, I don't view them as overlapping as much as I do, because what I do in my brain is I keep them independent. So that way, as I'm viewing the cage system across the fretboard, I can have any pentatonic shape underneath them, or any diatonic shape for that matter, and it's like 2 different levels of pieces that are happening at the same time. So if I'm looking at, for instance, my G shape right here, I can see this. I can see that chord shape right there. But then under it, I would play, you know, A Dorian or A Phrygian or, you know, whatever it might be, A Aeolian or whatever it might be that's happening underneath there. So, I mean, to kind of summarize for you, if I was using a C and I was using C pentatonics, I can give you that, Jeremy. So, for instance, if you were using a C major chord, right, which is the C shape, you'd be in the 4th position. And then of A minor, right? So depending on how you want to say this, Jeremy. So if I'm looking at this position of C major as being the 1st position, because that's where my pinky is, then the 5th position here and the 4th position is here. So C is here with the 4th position underneath it. C is here, the A shape, with the 5th position underneath it. And then the G shape is right here, and that would have the 1st position underneath it. And then here we'd have the E shape, and that would be the 2nd position. And then we'd have the D shape, and that would be the 3rd position. So that's how that would work if you want to think of it that way. Okay. Bruce just broke his high E string. Thanks, Brian. David, I'm glad you're here. Let's see. George says, I have problems with bar chords, so I strictly stick with normal chords. George, you got to learn your bar chords, buddy. Yeah, and George, if you're using an acoustic, it's even harder. to learn your bar chords. But the trick with bar chords for most people is, and this is the honest to God truth, I'm not lying to you at all. Bar chords are one of those things, and I tell this story and I'm not lying at all. There was a time when I was a kid and I was going to hang up guitar playing because I could not learn my bar chords. I couldn't press down on the strings. And my guitar teacher kept telling me, look, you just got to stick with it. You can't play it today, but what's going to happen is one day you're going to wake up and you're going to be able to play them. And George, that is exactly how bar chords came about for me. Is I couldn't play them. It took me way longer than it takes most of my students to learn how to play bar chords. I don't know what my problem was, but you just got to keep at it. But I will give you a couple of hints. First of all, when you're holding a guitar, you'll notice how I'm cupping it underneath my armpit a little bit, which is pushing the neck out a little bit. It's going to give me some elbow room here to get in to start making my bar chords. And the other part of that is you're not going to be able to see it very well, but on my finger, I don't play with the flat part of my finger. That isn't where I put my strings. I play with my strings kind of on the side of my finger. That way, if my finger was turned a little bit, which it's not, but if it was, I'd still have a straight edge. So I'm actually kind of coming at it at a bit of an angle like this. I'm not coming straight out like this, like that. I'm actually turning in a little bit like this, which makes it easier for me to bar all 6 strings. Okay. You can also work with thinner strings, George, if you need to. Okay. So if you're playing acoustic, I would highly recommend trying it on electric. When I was growing up, which many of you probably were the same way, and everybody always said you're supposed to start on acoustic because it makes you a stronger player because the strings are harder to push. Yeah, but it also makes it twice as frustrating and makes you hate practicing. So, and of course, this was back in the days of Sears acoustic guitars, so the strings were that far away from the neck. My whole philosophy, man, is that when you play guitar, it should be something that's nice and easy. It should be comfortable for you. If you want to learn to fight the guitar, you need another battle in your life and you need to fight the guitar, then that's fine. But for most people, you just want to have some fun and make it relatively easy to play. As you get better, you might go to a thicker set of strings or whatever, and that's perfectly fine. And if you don't, it's perfectly fine too. But those are things you want to think about a little bit. Let's see here. Yeah, bar chords are absolutely essential. Let's see. Chris says, I seem to be able to make most chords fairly easy now, but the C chord is still a pain. Can't seem to get comfortable, like lowering my wrist. Yeah, I mean, and that's a thing, but you've gotta focus on bouncing is the key. And again, the same thing I was just kind of telling George, don't play across the guitar this way, play at a bit of an angle like this. So again, if I turn over, you can kind of see, even though the lights are kind of bad there, you can kind of see I'm at an angle. I'm not playing like this, I'm turning a little bit, okay? And then that way it gives me room to reach underneath to give more space like that, okay? So I'm not at the mercy of my elbow. My elbow's over here and I got lots of room, so I can turn this way with my elbow over here a bit, okay? And then just practice bouncing a lot, But again, chords, guys, for anybody that's on this call right now that's already past their open chords, most of you can sympathize with how freaking hard it was when you first started learning how to play chords to get all your notes to work. And then you start going, why? Why is that not working? And then all of a sudden you practice enough and it goes away. So Chris and George, guys, don't get stressed about it. You'll be fine, okay? You just got to keep practicing. Jeremy says, have you gotten a chance to check out Ace Frehley's new cover CD? Yeah, I've heard most of the tunes on there. I really enjoyed the fact that Paul and Ace were on the same song together on that free tune, which was super cool. So yeah, I'm a huge Ace Frehley fan, I actually play in a Kiss tribute band, which I'll be doing either Periscope or Facebook Live. Next month, we're going to be performing. I don't wear makeup or anything like that, but I get to sing all the Ace tunes. So I sing like Rocket Ride and Shock Me and, 2000 Man, New York Groove, all those kind of songs. It's kind of fun. So anyway, let's see here. Steve, do you play with the fleshy part or the tip of your finger? The fleshy part of the tip. Well, it depends, okay? David, when I'm playing, like if I'm playing in a blues stance, I'm more playing with the pads of my fingers like this. When I go to bend, I'm on top, but when I'm primarily playing, I'm totally on the pads. I would call them the pads of my fingers, which are kind of on the curve where the finger is flat and then up on top, kind of midway through there is where I tend to play when I'm playing stuff. So let's see here. Laura says, how and what should I do to create a practice plan to improve my playing? Well, Laura, and again, the chats are coming in, so it's kind of hard to follow, but Laura, can you tell me, what do you need to do to improve, right? I mean, the big thing, Laura, is creating a plan based on the things that you're trying to do, right? Here's a couple things. Have short-term goals and then have long-term goals. And don't get mixed up by those, because if everything you've got is a long-term goal, you're going to get frustrated. Have short-term goals that are relatively easy to reach, right? So if you're not very good at the C chord, for instance, that should be something that you practice on a daily basis. You practice bouncing and what I call lift and shift, where you move back and forth between chords, things like that. So you need some short-term goals. Daily practice routines that I believe people should do on a daily basis is get your metronome out. You practice just exercises, right? Like this, metronome. Although I'm blind and I can't see it. Here, I'll just set it at 120 here. Although you probably won't be able to hear this very well, but so I'd set it at 120 and I just start. And I would just run through that, okay? These are things I do every single day, Laura. So I'll start down here and I'll go all the way up to probably 12, and then I'll turn back around and come all the way back down. And I'll start at 120, and then I'll start bumping it up and bumping it up and bumping it up. And that's something that I will do every day, and it might take me, 30 minutes to 45 minutes to run through just that one exercise. Then I'll start running through scalular exercises. So then I'll take, and I'll just again use 120, but I'll take my pentatonic, for instance, and I might do something where I go like this. Or I'll just take a little piece of it and just go. And then I'll move up to the next two strings. Just developing some strength in there, right? So I'll do that for a while, and then I might go through and I might start doing my my spread fingerings, my major scale. So then I've got. And so on. I'll just run through all of that kind of stuff. And then I'll do various patterns and things like that. But so it kind of depends on what it is that you're looking for. If you're looking for strength and synchronicity, you want to use a metronome. If you're looking for creativity, like I was talking about earlier with soloing, then it's not so much using a metronome as it is exploring your fretboard, looking at your fretboard, whatever scale that is that you're trying to use, and then you grab some jam tracks and you start trying to work with them a little bit. But again, not just blindly soloing over the top, but know what the chords are and start trying to make some correlation between what chord you're playing and what the melody would be, right? So if it's a G chord, if you know your cage stuff, if it's a G chord, you start thinking about G a little bit, D the same thing. If it's rhythm that you need, then you learn some songs that use rhythms, right? Whatever it be. Whatever it might be, anything like that. But just it kind of depends on what it is you're looking for rhythm. Jonathan says, how do you learn to do palm mute correctly? Well, palm mute is going to be right where the string, sorry, I got to get that light out of there, right where the string and the bridge meet, okay? I'm going to be using the karate chop part of my hand right where they meet, and I'm not pushing in, I'm just touching. But you can find it just by moving around. Like I'm going to start way too far up like this. Now as I move back, now I'm going to move back too far. You see, I can find my sweet spot by just moving back and forth. And of course, if I was playing a Les Paul right now or whatever it would be, the position in which my hand is going to find that ideal sweet spot is going to change. Because if the pickups are further up, you're going to have to play a little bit further up. You know, like we're on this guitar, I'm a little bit further back this way. So, okay, if I want a little bit heavier palm mute, I might push in a little bit. But you'll notice that changes the pitch a little bit as well. Or I can just move just slightly towards the headstock, and I get a little bit heavier style palm mute as well. So that's one thing that you'd want to do a little bit. Okay. Awesome. Well, it looks like we're doing good here. What time we got? 6:41. We're doing okay. I think I'm caught up with everybody so far. There was the question about delay. I am going to have Eric Letvin, who's been doing some videos for me. They're called Tone Zone, and he's been doing a bunch of different awesome things. And he's going to be doing a video talking about delay and mathematics. To tell you the truth, I don't really understand it myself. I just set my delays and screw around with them. And I know that Edge, for instance, uses 2 delays, and that's how he gets some of the sounds he gets, but you don't have to have 2 delays. But I'm going to have, I've already talked to Eric about doing one just talking about delays, and then creating like doubling effects or triplet feels and things like that. So I am not the guy to ask about setting your delay for, you know, what's funny about what I do is I use, back when I was on the road and I used to travel a lot, I used to have what was called the Frankenstein, which was just this huge frickin' rig, and it took me an hour to set up. I had 4 412s and two heads and a rack full of gear, and it was stupid. It was really stupid. It took me longer than the drummer to set up, and it was just a big mess, you know. So as I got older and I didn't want to carry so much crap around, and just, you know, night after night setting it up and tearing it down, and not only you're setting all that up, but you're setting up and tearing down, you know, all of the lights and the PA and everything like that. I just got tired of it, so I kept shrinking smaller and smaller. But I have never been a big pedal guy. I never have. I've never really been a pedal guy. So I have a couple of, I mean, I got a ton of pedals. You can't see them, but I got a ton of different pedals. But I don't really use them live. I've got a Taurus pedal that I use a lot for my boosts that I really, really love. And then I've got an Eventide that I really like the sounds of. But for the most part, when I'm playing live, I don't really use the Eventide either. So my stuff is pretty straightforward. So I don't use a lot of delay. Like I've probably talked about to you guys before, but like with my delay is always set at somewhere around 650, 660 milliseconds. That's where I have my delay set. And it's just in the background to wetten things up. If I'm playing clean or I'm doing a solo or something like that, and I'll have a little bit of reverb on there or something. And that's it. So, you know, I've got friends that like replicate tones, which I think is so great. And don't get me wrong, like this stuff that I'm messing with, I love the tones of amps. But I don't replicate like a David Gilmour tone, and then I don't replicate a, you know, Ted Nugent tone or Steve Vai tone or whatever. I have always just had my tone. That's what I do. So whether I'm playing in my Kiss band or I'm playing in my metal band or I'm playing in my progressive original band or whatever it might be, it's the same tone. I'm using the same gear all the time because the way I approach playing, the amp responds the way I need it to respond regardless of the style of music I'm playing. So I always have 4 channels, and that's it. I have one channel that's clean. I have one channel that's crunch. I have one channel that's rock, and then I have one channel that's lead. And then that's it. That's what I have. And 80% of the time, I never even go to the lead channel because I'm usually the only guitar player in the bands I play in, so I'm loud enough anyway. But that's how I've got my stuff set up. So I'm not dogging effects. I think effects are wonderful. And I've got friends that run huge pedal boards of effects, but I am not that guy. I've just never really been that. That's why I have Eric doing all the Tone Zone stuff, because Eric is a guru on that stuff. Like I call him when I want stuff and go, hey, how does this work? Or I'll call Paul over at Flatland Guitar, who does the, whatever it's called, Shop Talk, I think it's called. he does all my repairs and things. So those guys are the guys that tell me, you know, you should try this. Like a lot of you probably out there have messed. Has anybody out there messed with the Trio pedal yet? That, I think it's called Trio. I totally want to get one of those pedals, because then I could be jamming here and I could do something and set it up and start playing. But I haven't even tried it yet. So I just look at it and go, oh, is that going to take me like a week to learn how to use, or is it super easy? So if you have used the Trio pedal, you have to let me know. Yeah, it does. It looks super cool. But you know, my whole thing is I'm on a time limit. So if I'm talking to you guys and I want to jam, I don't want to spend 5 minutes trying to build something. I just want to grab it and go. Because for me, songwriting, I use my software for songwriting anyway. Yeah, and John says, and now there's a Trio with a looper too, which is great, but it just makes my learning curve even worse. So I don't know. I might give it a try. So if you have used the Trio pedal, if you tell me it's really hard to learn, then I'll know that I shouldn't go there. But if you tell me you've tried it and it's super easy, I might give it a shot. So, yeah. So anyway, that's my take on it. And I know, I think somebody was answering some questions about pedals there. Let's see here. Where were you? Yeah, Marilyn, did you get your questions? Thank you, everybody, for answering those questions, by the way. So, Marilyn, if you have any questions about pedals, I would be happy to help you. It looks like some people have been helping you a little bit. Oh, I am David. Chris Mingo, cheers. Oh, awesome. So yeah, is using foot switches just something we have to work on via trial and error? Seems like they're pretty essential for switching from clean sounds to punchier. Yeah. You got to get used to being able to switch patches for sure. You know, there's some trickery in there though. I mean, if you've got a really great amp, you can back off your volume and get a fairly clean tone, but you can't get crystal clean, you know, and then be able to come back up and have distortion. There's no amp that's going to give you all of that in one patch. Although there are things that you can get, you know, like if you think of Slash, he's a prime example. You know, you take this tone, but if you back it off, you can back it off and get some cleaner sounds. But it's not going to be glassy. It's not going to be like a Fender, you know, on a clean. You're still going to have a little bit of distortion in there, right? And that's okay as long as you don't need that, right? Or you might have a really glassy sound, really clean sound, and then you've got a pedal that's going to boost your distortion. You know, like for me, and again, this is just me, new school, old school, I don't know what you want to call me, but my amp has got to be able to make the distortion that I want. I don't want to spend $2,000 on an amp and then have to rely on a $50 pedal to make my distortion. I don't want that. The pedal, like the Taurus pedal that I use, it might give a boost, you know, like a Tube Screamer or something like that. I think for me, that's completely legitimate because sometimes you need that. You need to bring the edge up. But I don't want an amp that is clean and then the only way I can get distortion is by using some sort of external pedal. I want the amp to be able to create that. So the most important thing really with most amps is that you can get an ideal distortion sound, but you can also get a good clean sound. You know, like there's a lot of people out there that will tell you, you know, like the 5150s and stuff are great, and that whole series are great for heavy, but their clean tones aren't very good. We're on the opposite end. If you're a Fender guy, the Fenders are incredibly clean and sound wonderful, but sometimes the distortions lack if you're a Marshall guy or a Mesa guy or something like that. And so what I do a lot of is again, I've got my 4 channels, right? But then I've got leeway in between each channel. So one thing that I've got is on all my guitars, the tone knob is non-existent. I don't have a tone in any of my guitars. I have a presence control, which is it's called an SPC. It's made by EMG. And what it does is, if you can, I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but if I turn it all the way off, you'll be able to notice it a lot more if I put it on a clean channel. So if I go here, we'll grab a clean sound here. So if I do this, see, it gives it a boost. So if I've got a clean sound like this, and I want a little more, See, I can get a little more punch out of that. So that way, if I'm not near my amp or I don't want to patch switch, right? I've got this bump up that can bring me to the next level if I need it without switching anything. So if I'm not standing near my amp, or again, I don't want this big push from my glassy clean to my crunch. I just want something in between there, okay? That's what I use this for. And the big thing with the EMGs, even though they're well known for being metal pickups, which they certainly are, they just get some great clean sound. So like for me, if I go, now I'm on this clean guitar amp here. See, now I'm on my middle position pickup, which is this guy, this single coil, and I get some nice cleans. If I want to fatten it up a little bit, I'll go to the fourth position. See, now again, it's a little bit less glassy now when I go into that position, and even more so when I go here. See, it's starting to thicken up again. So I use this third position a lot for my clean stuff. See what I mean? So that helps out a lot as well. But then there, I turn up that SPC boost in my tone control, and I got some punch. Now I don't have Metallica. That's not going to get me there, right? But I've got enough to where I can play some good classic rock stuff. See what I mean? So it's really nice to be able to have that. So always remember, when it comes to your gear, like one of the tricks that I learned that Slash does a lot, which I incorporated a long time ago as a result of that, was instead of always having your volume on 10, and then that's as loud as your guitar is going to go, you can turn your volume off a little bit and then dial in your amp with your volume just down a little bit, and you get comfortable with having your volume down just a little bit. And then when you want more, you can turn your volume all the way up, and you get more of that, throughput signal, right? The signal is opened up more, and you get a little more gain, not so much volume, I don't think, but you get a little more gain running through there. And that's what he would do for his solos a lot, is he would just back off a little bit, and that's where he'd be, and then he'd pull it up for the rest of the way. So don't ever forget that your pickups, your volume control, and for me, not your tone, because I don't have a tone control in any of my guitars. They're all these SPC things that I've got put in, because that's how I've learned how to play. So no matter what patch I'm on, I can back off my volume, I can back off a pickup selection, and I can go into a different zone. And I can always turn the SPC up and bring my guitar just a little bit higher, right? So I hope I'm not boring anybody with this, but this is really, really important. So the most important thing that you learn when you start moving from being a bedroom guitar tone person to an actual performing person is, things like you don't want way too much bass on your amp, because it just sounds woofy through the PA, and it's just horrible. And you want to make sure that your mid-range is high enough to where you're cutting through the mix, which I see bands all the time that, the guitar player doesn't do that. And so he could be doing this and you'd never be able to tell, because nothing sounds defining. What makes a guitar sound defining is the mid-range. That's our frequency. That's a guitar player's frequency, is the mid-range. So if you're used to having bedroom tone, you're always used to having like a Metallica kind of tone. There's no mid-range in that. But when they play live, there's a ton of mid-range in their tone. So a tone that you get on a CD is not the same as the tone that you're going to get when your amp is loud. So you got to make sure that your mid-range is louder, and that your bass, like a JCM 800, doesn't have a lot of bass. You could turn the bass all the way up and you don't get a lot. But if you're running like a dual rectifier or a triple rectifier and you turn the bass all the way up, it gets flubby, or like a 5150. The bass gets really flubby. Well, that might sound cool in your room, but when you get out on stage and you turn the bass up like that, it sounds horrible through the PA. as bad as this sounds, you want your guitar tone to be relatively thin in terms of a frequency, so it cuts through the mix. So when you go to play, people hear you. You know, where we get so used to thinking when we're in our room that we have this different tone, and it's different when you're live. So that's something to think about a little bit as well, is the way that you're setting up the amp. You know, when I made my transition from high schooler to freshman in college, I had a lot of rude awakenings on playing guitar and my amp, my tone, all those things, because I hadn't been that skilled in playing live when I was in high school. I mean, I did a couple of, you know, things with buddies and whatever, but when I got out and started playing in college and then started traveling around and all that sort of thing, it was huge. So those are just things that you learn about your tone. Again, I hope I didn't go off on a tangent at all, but that's the way I approach playing guitar. So when I'm playing and you're out in the audience, you're hearing my guitar not just because of the volume of my amp. It's not that you're hearing the frequency of my amp. You're hearing it mixing with everybody else in the band. And it took a while to get used to that when I first started doing it, because it's very exposing. Because if you're used to having your mids off, again, you could be doing anything on stage and nobody can hear you because it's just a big blob of sound. There's no defining. But once you start learning how to use your frequencies more appropriately and start pushing that mid-range through, all of a sudden now you don't have to be as loud. You're cutting through the mix, which makes all the difference in the world. Which, again, like for me, I have to be a certain volume on stage because I use feedback to my advantage. I use all those kind of noises, but it's not overbearing. Like, it's never out of control for me. I'm never standing there and my amp is uncontrollably feeding back. I use feedback in my stuff because I'm a rocker, but it's always within control. I can always stop it. You know, if I grab my strings like this, they're not screaming at me, they'll stop. So my amp is loud enough relative to where I'm standing to my amp. So anyway, hopefully that stuff helps you guys a little bit. Let's see here. Let's see, Brian says, Steve, tell us about pickups, especially with Ibanez. We have a boatload of pickups, but one tone and selector. Well, again, pickups are a whole other thing. The thing that sucks about pickups is they're not like a pedal where you can just plug it in and try it and then plug in a different one. With pickups, you got to put them in the guitar, which means you probably got to buy them, right? And then you got to stick them in there. And again, thank God that my trip on guitar tone journey has always been fairly straightforward. The sound that I hear in my head, because I play these Ibanez gems and I play these EMGs, the sound that I hear in my head, I can replicate on just about any amp. Any amp. It doesn't matter if it's a Fender, if it's a Marshall, if it's a Boogie, I can find a tone that I like. And here's always been my rule to everybody, is you got to serve one master. You can only serve one master. You can't, if you have 7 different kinds of guitars, and don't get me wrong, please, I have tons of different guitars in this room too, but they're all vastly different from each other, right? Like I've got my Road Worn Strat sitting over here that I love to play, but it is not my home. I love to play it, and when I play it, I play differently. But when I grab this Ibanez gem, I'm home. It plays the way I play. The neck feels the way I need it to feel. These pickups respond the way I need them to respond. So if I'm going to go out and play in front of 5,000 people, this is the guitar that I'm going to use, or one of these. Now, Les Pauls are, again, I love Les Pauls, but I'm not very good at playing them because they feel awkward to me. They're too heavy. There's not enough frets. Everything is in the wrong place. The toggle switch is up here. It's all wrong for me. And again, I got buddies that's their go-to guitar. So I am not saying that gems are better, and that is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to decide who your master is, right? So if I'm going to go into a guitar store and I'm going to try out an amp, I'm bringing this with me, and I'm going to plug this in. I'm not grabbing a $179 whatever off the thing with whatever pickups in it and then plugging into the amp, because I'm not going to get a good replication of what that amp can do. I'm going to bring this guitar with me. So my master that I serve in terms of guitar here is my guitar. And my amp is always secondary. I will change amps like underwear, and I'm fine with it. I am not I am not worried about whether it's a Marshall or whether it's a Boogie. I've owned them all and I've loved them all. But I will exchange those and not feel the least bit bad about it, because this is where it starts and ends, is with my guitar. So if that makes sense, because people are always playing this chasing game where they get a different guitar and then they get different pickups and they get different amp, and they're never able to start formulating something that is them, right? So think about that a little bit as you go on your guitar journey. So again, this is where that bias thing that I've been talking about at the beginning of this get together has been really nice, because I can try out all of these other amps, these different sounds, but I'm using my guitar to do that. So hopefully that helps you. So guys, what time is it here? It's 7 o'clock. I know you got to get going. I don't want to hold you any longer. I hope I answered your questions. I hope you had some fun hanging out and learning a little bit about guitar gear and things like that. And we'll keep talking about it. I'm always here. Once a month we get together, we hang out and talk about whatever it is you like. I'll make sure I get these lights fixed for next time. And yeah, kind of cool, huh? I had these made. I actually had them made for Dan and everybody else too. So we'll have to see whether or not Dan would be interested in selling these. But yeah, these are my go-to shirts now. So guys, take care. God bless you all, and have a wonderful evening. Stay positive. Keep practicing. Stay in touch with each other, and keep motivating each other and helping each other out. And I'll see you all soon. Okay. So guys, take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay. Bye-bye.